Welcome to Intuitive's webinar, How Structured Data is the Backbone of Modern Cancer Care, from Chaos to Clarity in Cancer Data. Your speakers today include myself, Ken Deese. I'm Chief Marketing Officer here at Intuitive, and joined by Peter O'Toole, who is Intuitive's President and Chief Software Architect. Here's our agenda for our time together. We will start with a very short overview of Intuitive for those of us who may not be familiar with us. We'll set some context for the structured data discussion we are about to have, and then we'll share some very specific examples of how structured data is ensuring certification compliance, improving care quality, and fueling data transformation and AI initiatives. And then finally, we'll talk about charting a path forward to continue to leverage structured data for the benefit of patients. If anyone has questions along the way, there will be Q&A at the conclusion. You can just type your questions in the question box. I believe as you look at it is up in your upper right-hand corner. So there will be a Q&A at the end. We'll read your questions then. And a recording of this will be available within 24 to 48 hours of completion of today's webinar. So let's move on. Real quickly, Intuitive was founded 23 years ago. We're the market leader in structured oncology data in use at over 700 hospitals and cancer centers worldwide. We have a suite of 3 products, Intuitive Pathology, Surgery, and Insight, and they really are focused on gathering the most complete and compliant structured oncology data and providing the most user-friendly reporting platform for that data. And we have partnerships with certification authorities and complementary technology partners, all of us shaping the capture and use of structured data for the betterment of cancer care across the industry. Enough about us. Let's talk about structured data and what's happening in cancer care. Cancer care is changing very, very quickly. There's an estimated 1.9 million plus new cancer cases expected in the US in 2025. There are new treatments, diagnostics, biomarkers released almost weekly. The pace is really pretty incredible. The data volume as a result of that is doubling every 18 to 24 months in oncology specifically. Now, the problem with all this is that the vast majority of that data, whether that be pathology reports, operative notes, genomic profiles, whatever that is, lots of it, almost all of it, is unstructured and it's stored in PDFs or narrative text. And the fact of the matter is that's simply not good enough anymore for the kind of cancer care that all of you want to provide and the kinds of innovation initiatives that many of you have underway. You know, PDFs aren't a strategy, right? They're hard to search, even more difficult to share, hard to analyze, and they don't integrate really in any way with the decision support tools that you all need. So structured data is really important. And when we talk about structured data, we are talking about transforming free text into standardized coded fields that are then easily shareable, you know, really across the areas that are involved in delivering the cancer care. These are just 3 very simple examples of what you can do with structured data much more easily than you can through traditional narrative reporting and ways of capturing that data. So benefits of structured data are really pretty significant, right? They're meaningful. Everything from the interoperability it gives you across the EMRs and the labs to real-time population health analytics, seamless clinical trial matching, tumor board prep at a much faster pace, and ultimately better handoffs, safer handoffs, higher quality handoffs between the core teams delivering the care. So that is that's the context within which we are focused on helping our customers in the industry as a whole move to more and more structured data in pathology and surgery. And what I want to do now is turn things over to Peter O'Toole to share with you. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to ask a question before we go to Pete. Let me just get a little poll here. Um, where are you? A lot of the structured data initiatives are tied to this idea of digital transformation, the digitization of processes and data and everything that might be going on in your hospital. Um, just can you let us know where your hospital is on its digital transformation journey? We just be curious to see where y'all are. Could help us craft this a little bit better and then follow up as well. Give that another minute or two, another second or two. Great. Yeah. Thank you very much. Now, without further ado, we'll move Pete O'Toole. Pete?
Thank you, Ken. Thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate it. We're going to walk through a few examples of what structured data can do for us in cancer care. And we want to start with some of the most effective examples, what we call clinically actionable data. So there's a lot of different types of data that might be collected, in a patient's journey. And, we really want to focus on what's most relevant and really enables us to take actions clinically in real time. Here we define clinically actionable data to be data that can be used immediately after its creation to make decisions on individual patients' care. And one really great example is taking data collected by pathologists when they're doing synoptic reporting, according to CAP protocols or protocols in other countries like RCPath, and to populate the staging forms for an oncologist in real time. So shown on screen here, Oracle integrates intuitive data into AJCC version 8 or 9 staging forms in their cancer staging module as part of that workflow. And jumping to Meditech, they're another vendor that takes advantage of structured data from Intuitive to provide oncologists with easy access to pathologic staging data, making the cancer staging process more efficient and safer. Both those vendors take structured data directly from the pathologist and make it a lot easier for the oncologist to complete staging, and that's all based on the idea of data being structured. Switching gears a little, there are many therapies now targeted at patients with specific biomarkers or other specific phenotype or genotype information. And, with structured data, immediately after a lab report or a pathology report is signed out, you can, trigger alerts. You can add that patient to a list, to be consulted, and basically much more quickly and easily and precisely find patients that match specific therapies or trials that might be going on in your institution. To compare that to how it would work, with just manually doing chart reviews, it's going to be a lot slower and a lot less effective. You can jump to the next one, Ken. So setting the stage there, it's also when you're receiving results as a physician, maybe from an outside lab, if you're receiving NGS results, for example, there are so many results in those reports, and we've seen examples of those PDFs Ken mentioned being 50, 60 pages long. But the amount of information in them that's clinically significant at this time, variants of known significance, is relatively small for any given type of cancer, and it's changing quite rapidly, all the time. So another use of structured data is, in this case, we work together with Caris Life Sciences and the CAP to come up with a way to get structured data from the reference lab instead of a PDF, and then pinpoint the exact data points of interest for an oncologist treating a specific type of cancer. In the example here, non-small cell lung cancer, and populate just those data elements for them while still maintaining a reference to the full report if you need it. And then, once you pull those data points in, we can do all the other things we talked about, like sharing that downstream again with the oncology system, or triggering alerts or rules or things like that. And just wanted to point out that we published a poster on this, and you can learn more. We can share the link to that later on. So that kind of brings us to the next set of examples. So we just focused on clinically actionable structured data. So what are the things that you can do that are, when you have a very high confidence in the data collected because it was collected and signed off on by a physician, and when it's in near instantaneous time, you can take clinical actions quickly. Population health, the approach, is sometimes allows for a slower pace. Doesn't necessarily have to, though. And with structured data, population health can be a lot more real time as well. Now, I'm going to jump to the next slide. There are two different approaches when we talk about this, and I just wanted to briefly mention that when you think of population health, you might think of registries like cancer registries. And on the left side, we have the model that type of institution follows. So in that case, we're going to aggregate data, let's say from all the hospitals in one state. They're going to share all their data on each patient at case level, all the demographics, all the data points that exist with a central authority, and that central authority is going to compile all that data, which gives them maximum flexibility to figure out what they want to do with it later. That works well for like an entire state, entire province, sometimes the whole country, where the jurisdiction can be controlled. It works well for like a large institution. And that's based on structuring data and having really well-defined transmission standards using like FHIR or HL7, and then layering on top of that semantic standards like SNOMED, that allows all data from many different heterogeneous environments to land in one central place and still be comparable in like an apples to apples way. That isn't always possible, though. And when it's not possible due to privacy concerns, different organizational boundaries, things like that, there's a federated data approach that's also becoming popular. And in that case, the data stays where it is. So you might have many institutions participating in a study. You might have multiple jurisdictions, multiple nations even participating in a study, and the data simply can't be aggregated in one place. In that case, we're going to federate it, and you're still going to follow standards for the semantics and how the data is defined and what it means, such as SNOMED and ICD and things like that. In that case, people are focusing more on how is the data stored in each location. So we're looking at things like OMOP, PCORNet, I2B2. These are like really useful ways to structure data in a similar way. That allows whoever's coordinating this central study, let's say, to push out a query, to push out computation to the places that are storing the data, have them run it, and they only report back the statistical outcome of that query. They don't report back every single patient, doesn't report their identity, just the statistics. Like we had, X number of cases, and 95% of them met this criteria, and then that is what's aggregated. So it's a privacy preserving way to do population health that's also becoming very, very popular, and there's some great examples of that. You can jump to the next slide, Ken. So a real world example, the province of British Columbia, which is a longtime customer of Intuitive, needed a way to aggregate synoptic data across approximately 200 providers. They use 5 different LIS systems. So, a tricky problem to get a full province-wide view of compliance and quality. We developed Insight to take in both Intuitive synoptic data and other patient data from the LIS. And from there, the British Columbia Cancer Agency and the Provincial Health Services Authority created a dashboard that drilled down to site level detail. And by making these scores visible to the sites and providers, they were able to drive clinical improvements across the province. And one of the most notable examples was that surgeons, seeing that they were routinely taking out less than 12 lymph nodes in the colon, which was not compliant with the standard of care, immediately self-corrected without even, without any sort of action being taken. So oftentimes the very act of measurement leads to improvement, and that's just a known, psychological phenomenon, and they've seen that here. This is an example of aggregating data from all over the province into one database, back to that aggregation versus federation approach. But it's interesting to note that this data is also federated at a national level with projects like the ESPRI project in Canada, which looked at data from multiple provinces. So they aggregate within their jurisdiction, and then federate with other provinces to do an even broader, pan-Canadian comparison. And I believe they've published several papers on the things they've been able to do with this data, and I encourage you to look those up for examples of what can be done. And moving on to another example, cancer registry, again, this is going to come up a lot when we're talking about population health, when we're talking about cancer data. There are various standards for transmitting data to central registries. We've participated in a lot of the work groups to help standardize these and worked with state of California and state of New York and province of Ontario and other provinces to work on this. And one of the best examples is the province of Ontario, where they required the NACER Volume 5, or now called NACER Cancer Pathology Reporting Standard, to go from every lab to the central registry. And in so doing, they were able to collect structured data from all of their hospitals for now, I would think, over 15 years, probably at this point. And that also led to the large-scale adoption of synoptic reporting, which has other benefits at the individual patient level. And you can see they also have done many studies there with that critical mass of users. If you want to pop that one up, Ken, there's they've been able to do many other studies besides this one, but this is one example of how does synoptic cancer pathology reports benefit pathologists, surgeons, and oncologists. And they also do a lot with the data centrally. So it's an example of how that aggregation model can work when we use structured data and we standardize that data and define, within a region that has the ability to do that, define standards everyone has to follow. You can jump to the next one, Ken. Okay, so another example I'd love to talk about is surgical synoptic reporting, or synoptic operative reporting, depending on what you're talking about. And another example coming out of Canada, there's a pan-Canadian synoptic surgery reporting standard effort made several years ago, where multiple provinces adopted reporting standards that were, similar in nature for some of the top disease sites. But when large institutions may have to consent to aggregate their patients' data on a large scale, and that would have been impossible to pull off in a pan-Canadian multi-province scenario. So in that case, each province implemented standardized synoptic reports, but the requirements for compliance weren't so much at that level of what's in the report and what are the data elements, but it required specific computations or like statistical reports to be created at the provincial level and shared with the pan-Canadian body. So they didn't go in and look at individual cases and say, are surgeons including these data elements? They just said, at the end of the day, we need this province to be able to report back the level of compliance on all these surgeries, and let them it gave them more freedom in the individual format of the reports, as long as the output of the aggregate data was the same. This means that the data was structured similarly. It didn't have to be shared across jurisdictions. You could maintain privacy. You could keep Nova Scotia data in Nova Scotia, Manitoba data in Manitoba, but pull all that statistics together later. And it led to some real improvements, which you can see some examples on this slide. And there were multiple studies published based on this work. And then also, there are many similar efforts in the US with the American College of Surgeons, and there have been other efforts by others just locally. There have been many studies published that show that when you use synoptic operative reporting, you collect structured data and actually measure, you're going to see improvements actually in the performance of surgery according to standards of care. I think there's one more paper there, Ken, and then we can jump to the next one. Great. So, all these examples, there's a lot we can talk about, but the before, when you're not using structured data, you're looking at manual chart reviews, looking for data in a lot of different systems that can't really connect and can't really share data with each other, which delays decisions. It delays enrolling people in trials or selecting the right treatment. It may delay in, some sort of quality improvement. It generally leads to a much slower process to act on that data. And a lot of times it's not really going to be clinically actionable until after the fact. Whereas once the process of any particular aspect of cancer care documenting is made structured, you can automate the feeds to the registries from surgical reports or pathology reports or others. You can, discover a patient cohort with a click if you've defined the right data specification in advance. And you can do things like, provide alerts for gaps in care, identify new patients, things like that.
Pete spent some time covering sort of the organizational level um, benefits of structured data. We just want to really quickly talk about role-specific benefits of structured data um, within this context. Everything from CIOs for whom interoperability is a day-to-day operations concern to they're being challenged with AI initiatives. And as we're going to talk about a little bit, structured data is vital for AI effectiveness. And then CIOs also getting the benefit of the time savings by reducing manual abstraction, time and costs. CMIOs are always seeking better clinical decision support and optimized workflows. Structured data helps deliver on that. Uh, Quality leaders, um, always looking for better quality data faster, and structured data enables that. And for cancer service line leaders who are always looking to foster better care coordination and accelerate research opportunities, that ability to share the data that structured data provides is really vital. And speaking of the structured data and AI readiness, almost every organization that we work with and talk to has some form of AI initiative underway. And core to that is AI is only as good as the data that it's fed, right? This is sort of a classic garbage in, garbage out thing that a lot of us have lived with, and through other technology cycles. AI is no different, and actually structured data is even more important for large language models to work really effectively and for AI to make the contributions that it's capable of, because messy data, a lot of narrative data, um, incomplete, not well shared data introduces biases, blind spots, outputs aren't nearly as reliable then. So structured data is becoming and is being better understood as the required fuel for data transformation and AI initiatives really um, across the industry. And as it relates to that, just another quick poll. Um, where are you in evaluating your use of AI at this point? Just kind of curious as to, is there any conversation? Is it being evaluated? Is anything testing? Are you using it in any way? Just trying to get a sense from all of you um, where these AI initiatives are right now. So give everybody a few seconds. Just another 10 seconds or so, and then we will get back to Pete. Great.
Okay.
Back to you, Pete.
Thanks, Ken. So we realized that transitioning to structured data doesn't happen overnight. It can be phased, with different parts of the care continuum. We recommend identifying high-value data sources. Pathology, surgical oncology, genomics, those are all good areas to start with. Mapping to some sort of standardized protocol and system of coding. Starting with something that already exists and is published is, very helpful. But ultimately, we need to get something deployed. Synoptic reporting is a great way to start. Uh, Making sure clinicians are, have a checklist to ensure they're collecting the data that's important, hopefully also making their lives easier along the way, and providing very, very clear prognostic indicators from pathology to oncology, and providing very, very clear findings from surgery to pathology and oncology. is a very clear benefit, even without all the structured data aspects. But once you do that, now you've got the structured data in your workflow. You can integrate it into the EHR. You can do some of the things we discussed earlier. And then you monitor and refine that process, see what's missing, see what other questions people are asking that they might want to get out of this information later, and go back and kind of, loop back and modify, the standardized data elements you've defined, and repeat, rinse and repeat. On the next slide, just, it's important to realize that, some may ask, why not just, haven't the EHRs already solved this problem? And though, mandates to standardize health IT are helpful, so knowing that the smoking status and medications and allergies and things like that, in an EHR and every patient's chart are standardized across vendors in the US, today is very helpful. But those companies are very broad and they're busy keeping up with mandates, and they provide very broad capabilities. But as you know, in cancer care, each type of cancer requires, very different nuanced data elements that change often as research breaks new ground. And keeping infrastructure up to date with those changing standards is very challenging, but worthwhile, in order to get the benefits of structuring data. It's much easier when you have a partner focused only in this area. And anecdotally, last week, when I was at the CAP 25 conference and the Future of Cancer Data Summit, I heard many physicians mention how much data is generated by their department, but it's often overlooked or underutilized, mostly because it's not stored or maintained in a structured or standardized way. So as soon as the cases are signed out, or the reports are signed off on, if they just become free text at that point, they immediately lose their value. They can't be used immediately, and some sort of mining process has to take place. So just a point, like, that is a good start, that tip of that iceberg, but there's so much more data generated by other departments that are sometimes considered ancillary departments. That's actually where we need to start. That's where most of the data for cancer care is coming from. And so, what is Intuitive's role in all of this? Intuitive provides synoptic reporting for pathology and surgical oncology. That is compliant with standards from College of American Pathologists and RCPath and ICCR and American College of Surgeons and the Canadian Partnership Against Cancer. And so kind of depending where you are and what your accreditations are and what you're trying to do, Intuitive is able to help build protocols that, provide compliance with those standards of care, and also give you the tools to measure and, make use of that data later with our product for Intuitive Insight. So the process, really improves efficiency and accuracy. As to like, what do we do with all that data once it's been collected? So we've changed our process. We're doing synoptic reporting. People are happy with it. At an individual patient to provider level, there's a lot of really, it's improved communication, it's improved completeness of reporting and standardization of reporting. But now we've aggregated a lot of data in our institution, or maybe across institutions, and we want to do something with that. And Intuitive Insight provides some out-of-the-box reports for synthesizing pathology and surgery data, along with EHR and LIS data. And this can be to drive clinical or operational improvements, used to help, speed up enrollment in trials and, a bunch of other things. And we'll get into a few examples. So one, precision profile matching. You can jump right to the next example there, Ken. When a trial or a treatment requires rapid identification of patients meeting very specific profiles, structured data enables real-time access for physicians and clinical trial coordinators. So in this case, patients with ER, PR, and HER2 triple negative results appear in this report as soon as the pathologist signs it out. So very, very instantaneous access. There are a lot of other examples like that coming up every day, and we plan to just continue working with our customers to identify what those profiles are and make that available. In the context of research, it's hard to say that research, there's a lot of open-ended inquiry, right? So in this case, we want to work with people to help them pinpoint the data that they're interested in when they're doing a study. But a lot of times you just want a starting point, And in the next example, you can see, for example, if you just wanted to get a look at the different morphologies available in your data sets that you've been collecting, this report breaks down the morphology of colon resection cases to make it easy to visualize the relative incidence of each histologic type. That may be a good starting point, for what you're looking to do. And in the next example, lymph node involvement, this report shows the histogram of positive lymph nodes broken down by macro, micro, and ITC metastasis in breast DCIS resections. Again, maybe something you want to visualize, maybe a good starting point, maybe a place to look for patterns or aberrations that don't seem right, maybe a starting point for a research question. And there are a lot more visualizations like that available in Intuitive Insight. And then next, leading to more operational like quality improvement. This is another really important area. In the next example, the ER/PR HER2 negative, the negative proportions of each test is something that has to be reported annually by a lab when they are accredited. It's typically a very time-consuming manual process. We've heard that from many customers and heard about the processes they underwent before they had access to this. When you've done your reporting in a structured data way and everything can be compared equally, this is just clicking a button, and you can just view this anytime to see how you're doing. And then next, a simpler example, but things like turnaround times and other operational metrics are also very helpful to be able to track. They're also rooted in using structured data and making sure that data is available and reportable in an easy to visualize way, which you can see here in Intuitive Insight as well.
Thanks, Pete. So in our time together, Pete's spent a fair amount of time sort of really walking through the cancer care value of structured reporting. And it also has some significant economic impact. Structured reporting simply enables far fewer hours to be spent on the manual abstraction of data. It's faster time to treatment, which leads to better outcomes. It also can help fuel more research revenue potential for you, and is a foundational element needed for your organization's digital transformation and AI initiatives. That if they're not there yet, they are absolutely on the way. And the bottom line is the future of cancer care belongs to organizations that invest in structured data. Because look, precision medicine can't be imprecise, and the data that we generate today in large part is not in a form that enables precision medicine to the degree that it is capable of. AI tools cannot learn from noise, so structured data fuels there. And the more accessible the data is, the better the care teams can do. So making structured data the backbone of your cancer program, start with pathology, choose tools that capture the data at the source, and build toward an AI-enabled precision care future. So thank you. And we have, if any of you have any additional questions, drop them in now. Okay, here's the first one. First question, Pete. How do you see pathologists impacting or playing a role in an organization's precision medicine strategy? And what can I do at my facility to be part of that conversation?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, the pathology department, when you take into account molecular genomic data, clinical lab data, anatomic pathology data, and other sources, whole slide images now with digital pathology, by far generates, more precision data than any other part of the hospital or of the process. So I think bringing that awareness, to the table, and ideally, bringing, some examples like the things we've shown, things that can be done, and and hopefully bring some data to those precision medicine boards, to tumor boards, and raising that level of awareness. I think a lot of times um, people aren't aware of what is possible with the structured data approach, and a lot of times also there's a structured data approach already in place. You may be doing synoptic reporting in one of these specialties, but not storing the structured data, or maybe you are and just not taking advantage of it. So taking stock and raising the awareness of what's available. I think a lot of folks downstream just don't know it's possible. Like they don't know you can populate the oncologist's staging form, with data that came from pathology. They don't know that surgeons are recording, their procedures in a very structured way that could enable, fine-grained measurement and, performance improvement.
Thanks, Pete. We had one more question, and this was, can you discuss the implications for revenue generation in more depth?
Well, I think that for sure, following structured data protocols and it, really helps with completeness and with specificity. So, for example, we didn't really get into this, but when a pathologist or a surgeon is completing a protocol that's driven by structured data, with the products at Intuitive, at least, there's a lot of calculation and suggestion and recommendation going on, and sort of selectively prompting you to fill out additional information in specific areas. So when it comes to like sort of maximizing billing, if that's what the question's about, it definitely helps with that just by ensuring a very, very complete picture of the procedure that was performed, or of the case that was being diagnosed. Because a lot of times that's just a matter of ensuring that enough information is included, and that's what like clinical documentation improvement people teach surgeons to do, is to make sure you mention this or mention that. With a structured data approach, the application will just prompt you and make a field required. Now you sort of need to enter that, or it could be optional. So that's one way. And in other ways, I think that data provides revenue generating opportunities, as well. Whether that's using that data to, um, hopefully boost participation in trials. That's obviously a source of revenue for hospitals. Whether it's, maybe taking the data sets and using them in some way to generate, synthetic data that others can use for studies. I think there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of value in data that's becoming apparent in the last few years that maybe wasn't apparent before. I hope that helps.
All right. Thank you very much, Pete. And thanks to all of you for attending the webinar. We greatly appreciate you taking the time out of what we know are very busy schedules. So thanks again very much, and be on the lookout for a video of the recording in the next 24 or 48 hours or so. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Appreciate it.